Let me hit you with something real. If you don't understand your own emotions, you're not running your life. Your emotions are. And if you're blind to that fact, then everyone around you, your boss, your partner, your kids, they're all paying the price for your lack of awareness. Here's the deal: emotional intelligence isn't some fluffy self-help term. It's about owning the fact that you can't lead, you can't build strong relationships, and you sure can't create lasting success if you don't first know yourself. And let's be honest, a lot of people walk around thinking they're self-aware, but if I ask the people closest to you, would they agree? Or would they say, "He's reactive, she's defensive, he never listens, she takes everything personal"? If you can't control your inner world, your outer world is going to stay messy. Most people like to believe they know themselves, but the truth is, self-awareness is one of the rarest skills out there. And I'll tell you why it's uncomfortable. It's not fun to look in the mirror and admit that you're the one creating half of your problems. But that's the deal. If you don't recognize your own patterns, if you don't pay attention to how you actually come across, then you're walking through life blindfolded while everybody else is paying the price for your lack of awareness. And here's the kicker: you can't change what you won't confront. Let's get brutally honest here. Self-awareness isn't just knowing your strengths, because that's the easy part. Everyone loves to list the things they're good at. Real self-awareness is about being honest about your blind spots, your triggers, and your weaknesses. If you're quick to anger, do you admit that, or do you excuse it by saying, "Well, that's just how I am"? If you get defensive every time someone points out a flaw, do you own that, or do you spin it so the other person looks like the problem? See, most people would rather protect their ego than deal with the truth. But the truth is the only place where growth begins. Think about the last argument you had. Did you actually listen, or were you just waiting for your turn to talk? Did you consider that maybe the tone of your voice was escalating the conflict, or did you just assume the other person was overreacting? If your answer is that the problem was all on them, then that's your lack of self-awareness talking. You can't manage relationships, you can't lead people, you can't build trust if you have no idea how you're showing up in the first place. Emotional intelligence begins with this one principle: you cannot manage what you cannot see. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're driving a car with mud splattered across the windshield. You're trying to stay on the road, but your vision is blocked. You keep swerving, missing turns, and bumping into things. That's what life looks like without self-awareness. You're driving blind, and the wreckage you leave behind is your relationships, your opportunities, and your own peace of mind. Now, what do most people do? Instead of cleaning their own windshield, they get out of the car and start yelling at traffic. They blame their spouse, their boss, their kids, the economy, anything and everything but their own lack of vision. But here's the truth: if you can't see yourself clearly, the problem is you, not the world. Self-awareness is about slowing down long enough to ask, why am I feeling this way? Why am I reacting this strongly? What am I really afraid of right now? Because behind every emotional spike is a story you're telling yourself. Maybe you're angry because you felt disrespected. Maybe you're anxious because you don't trust your own ability to handle what's coming. Maybe you shut down because conflict reminds you of something painful in the past. The point isn't to judge yourself for feeling these things. The point is to actually recognize them. Because if you don't recognize them, you'll keep reacting on autopilot, and autopilot usually leads straight into trouble. And let's not sugarcoat this: self-awareness isn't about obsessing over yourself. It's not about navel-gazing or overthinking every emotion. It's about owning your reality. If you're short-tempered, admit it so you can learn to manage it. If you avoid tough conversations, admit it so you can start building courage. If you get defensive, admit it so you can work on receiving feedback better. That's what accountability looks like. It's not about beating yourself up, it's about telling yourself the truth. Because once you tell the truth, you have power. And until you tell the truth, you're powerless. Here's the hard fact: most of the problems in your life are not happening to you, they're happening through you. The job you lost, the relationship that ended, the friendship that went cold, maybe they all have something in common, and that common denominator is you. Now, you can either keep blaming everybody else, or you can wake up and admit that your patterns are running the show. That's why self-awareness is the first step to emotional intelligence. Without it, you're just reacting. With it, you have a choice. So the bottom line is this: until you can see yourself clearly, you can't lead yourself. And until you can lead yourself, you can't expect to lead anybody else. You can't manage your team, your family, or your future if you don't first manage your own inner world. And that starts with the simple but difficult practice of being honest with yourself. Ask the tough questions, pay attention to your reactions, get feedback from people who aren't afraid to tell you the truth. Because emotional intelligence doesn't start with managing other people, it starts with managing you. And that's only possible when you've got the courage to see what's really going on inside. Here's the truth: Most people don't lose control because the situation is impossible. They lose control because they never created space between what happens and how they respond. Life throws something at them, and boom, they react without thinking. Someone cuts them off in traffic, they start yelling. Their partner makes a comment, and they're instantly defensive. Their boss criticizes a project, and they either shut down or lash out. The problem isn't the event. The problem is that they skip the pause. And that pause is everything. That pause is where your power lies. Without it, you're just a puppet pulled around by your emotions. With it, you're in charge again. Think about it, emotions are like waves. They rise, they peak, they crash. If you catch yourself in the rise and just ride it out, you stay balanced. But if you let it slam into you without any awareness, it knocks you flat on your back. The pause is what lets you catch that rise instead of being drowned by it. Most people live life at the mercy of their triggers. They say things in anger they regret for years. They make decisions in fear that cost them opportunities. They avoid conversations in discomfort and end up with broken relationships. All of it comes down to a failure to pause. Now let's talk about naming emotions. This is where the game changes. Science backs this up, but you don't even need science to see it. You've lived it. When you put a name on what you're feeling, the intensity drops. If you say, I'm angry, you've already created some distance. You're no longer swimming inside the anger. You're standing on the shore watching it. That act of naming shifts you from being consumed by an emotion to observing it. And when you observe something, you can manage it. Here's what most people do wrong. They confuse their emotions with their identity. They don't say, I feel anxious. They say, I am anxious. They don't say, I feel angry. They say, I am angry. Do you see the difference? When you make it part of your identity, you lock yourself in it. You give it power to define you. But when you name it for what it is, a temporary feeling, you take back the power. Feelings are visitors, not permanent residents. They show up, they stay for a while, and then they leave. But if you treat them like they're who you are, you're stuck with them forever. Let me be blunt here. If you can't name what you're feeling, you'll end up mismanaging it. You'll call frustration anger and lash out when really you just needed a break. You'll call disappointment failure and give up when really it's just a setback. You'll call stress, I hate my life, when really it's just overload that needs structure. Mislabeling your emotions is like mislabeling medicine. If you take the wrong prescription, you're not going to get better. Naming your emotions accurately is the prescription that allows you to handle them properly. And here's where accountability comes in. Nobody else can do this work for you. You can't expect your partner to calm you down if you refuse to pause. You can't expect your coworkers to tiptoe around your moods because you don't take responsibility for naming what's happening inside you. If you're constantly reactive, constantly blowing up, constantly shutting down, that's not a personality trait. It's a lack of discipline. You're not doomed to be that way. You're just not willing to use the pause. And until you use it, you'll keep giving away your power to every little trigger that comes your way. Let's make this practical. Someone says something that ticks you off. You feel the heat rise in your chest. Your face tightens. Your jaw clenches. Instead of spitting out the first thing that comes to mind, you say to yourself, I'm feeling anger right now. That's it. You don't justify it. You don't act on it. You just name it. And once you name it, you've slowed the reaction enough to ask, do I want to speak from this anger or do I want to speak from my values? That's control. That's self-mastery. But here's the pitfall. Most people tell themselves, I can't help it. That's just how I am. No, that's an excuse. You can help it. You just don't want to sit in the discomfort of pausing because it forces you to confront your feelings instead of dumping them on someone else. The pause feels unnatural at first because you're used to instant reactions, but growth always feels awkward in the beginning. You don't build muscle without soreness. You don't build self-control without pausing. The payoff is massive. When you learn to pause and name your emotions, you stop making permanent decisions based on temporary feelings. You stop destroying relationships over things that didn't need to be said. You stop sabotaging opportunities because you couldn't hold back for 3 seconds. And maybe most importantly, you stop being controlled by everybody else's behavior. Because once you realize you can pause, you can name and you can choose. Nobody has the power to hijack your peace unless you hand it over. So here's the bottom line. Pausing is your reset button and naming is your anchor. Together, they put you back in control of your life. Without them, you're a passenger strapped to the roller coaster of your emotions. With them, you're the driver steering with clarity. And if you want to live a life where you're not constantly cleaning up the mess of your reactions, then you better get serious about practicing this. The pause and the name are small moves that create big freedom. And until you master them, emotional intelligence will always stay out of your reach. Most people live their lives as slaves to their feelings. They get up when they feel like it. They work hard when they feel motivated. They treat people kindly when they feel in a good mood. And that's exactly why their lives are inconsistent, unpredictable, and often disappointing. Feelings are temporary, unreliable, and constantly shifting. One day you're inspired, the next day you're exhausted. 1 hour you're patient, the next hour you're snapping at everyone around you. If your entire decision-making process is dictated by how you feel in the moment, you'll never build stability, because stability requires a foundation, and feelings are not a foundation, values are. Let's draw a hard line here. Values are chosen, feelings are reactions. You don't get to pick your feelings. They show up uninvited like guests you didn't plan for. But values, those are the commitments you set in stone about who you are and how you want to live, no matter what shows up in your emotional world. If you value integrity, then you tell the truth, even when lying would save you from discomfort. If you value respect, then you speak calmly, even when anger is pressing you to lash out. If you value discipline, then you follow through on your goals, even when your feelings are screaming at you to quit. That's the difference between living on purpose and living on impulse. Think about the last time you said something you regretted. I'll bet money it wasn't because you intentionally chose to violate your values. It was because your feelings hijacked you. Anger told you to lash out. Fear told you to stay silent when you should have spoken up. Insecurity told you to gossip or tear someone else down to feel better. In those moments, your feelings overrode your values and you paid the price. And the painful part, you knew better. That's what stings. You knew what your values were, but you didn't pause long enough to let them drive your behavior. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine you're in a heated argument and everything inside you wants to shout, insult, or slam the door. But instead, you stop and ask yourself, what do I value in this moment? If your value is love, then your response has to line up with that, even if you're furious. If your value is growth, then maybe you choose to listen instead of defend. That's what emotional intelligence really looks like, not letting the storm inside you dictate your behavior, but letting your deeper commitments anchor you in the middle of that storm. Here's where most people go wrong. They treat values like decorations, not directions. They'll tell you they value honesty, but the moment they feel cornered, they lie to get out of it. They'll say they value health, but the second they feel stressed, they binge on junk food. They'll claim they value family, but the moment they feel tired, they ignore their kids or snap at their spouse. If your values only show up when it's convenient, then they're not values, they're preferences. And preferences won't change your life. Only values backed up by action will. You've got to make a decision. Am I going to be the kind of person who lets temporary feelings steer the ship, or am I going to be the kind of person who lives anchored by my principles? Because one path leads to chaos, and the other leads to consistency. Chaos is unpredictable. You never know which version of yourself is going to show up. Consistency, on the other hand, builds trust. People know what to expect from you. They know your word means something. They know you won't crumble under pressure. That's what values-driven living creates, and it's exactly what feelings-driven living destroys. Here's the kicker: values require sacrifice. When you choose to act from your values, you often have to go against what feels good in the moment. It feels good to avoid conflict, but if you value honesty, you'll have the hard conversation. It feels good to stay in bed, but if you value discipline, you'll get up and do the work anyway. It feels good to snap back when someone disrespects you, but if you value composure, you'll respond with calm strength instead. That's not easy, but it's powerful. Because every time you choose values over feelings, you reinforce your identity as someone who's in charge of their life instead of being tossed around by emotion. And let's not pretend this is about perfection. You're going to slip up. You're going to let feelings win sometimes. The point isn't to never fail. The point is to become aware of when you failed in course, correct faster the next time. Emotional intelligence is not about never feeling angry, fearful, or sad. It's about recognizing those feelings, naming them, and then choosing to act in alignment with who you've decided to be, not how you temporarily feel. So here's the bottom line: if you want real power, stop letting your feelings be the boss. Feelings are data, not dictators. They can tell you what's happening inside you, but they don't get to tell you who you are or how you behave. Your values are the map. Your values are the anchor. Your values are the standard that keeps you steady when everything inside of you wants to break apart. And until you start living by them consistently, your emotions will run the show and your life will stay reactive, chaotic, and exhausting. But the day you let your values guide your responses, that's the day you take back control. That's the day people start trusting you, and that's the day you start respecting yourself. Most people walk around with a blind spot the size of a billboard, and the only reason it stays there is because they refuse to look in the mirror that other people are holding up. Feedback is that mirror. It shows you how you actually come across, not how you think you come across. And if you're serious about building emotional intelligence and self-awareness, you cannot afford to avoid it. Here's the truth. Other people see things about you that you will never see on your own. You're inside your own head. You've justified your behavior, excused your patterns, and rationalized your reactions so many times that you've convinced yourself you're reasonable. But the people around you, the ones on the receiving end of your tone, your choices, your habits, they know the truth. They know where you're short-tempered, where you're careless, where you're blind. If you're too proud or too defensive to let them tell you, then you'll keep repeating the same mistakes while convincing yourself you're doing fine. Let me be blunt. If everybody in your life is telling you the same thing and the only person who disagrees is you, the problem is you. Maybe your boss says you're unreliable with deadlines and your partner says you never follow through at home, but you tell yourself they're just being unfair. No, they're giving you a gift. They're showing you what you don't want to see. Feedback is uncomfortable, but so is a mirror when you don't like your reflection. You can either smash the mirror or face the reality. One option keeps you stuck. The other one sets you free. Here's why feedback matters so much. Without it, you're living in a distorted version of reality. Think about driving a car with no rearview mirror and no side mirrors. You can look forward, but you're blind to everything else. You might feel like you're doing fine, but eventually you're going to crash into something you never saw coming. That's how most people live, completely unaware of the impact they're having on others, unaware of the patterns holding them back, and unwilling to listen to the people trying to tell them. And then they wonder why they keep running into the same problems over and over again. The biggest obstacle to feedback is ego. Nobody likes being told they're wrong. Nobody likes hearing that they hurt someone. But that sting you feel when you hear hard feedback, that's the exact signal you're hearing something important. If it didn't sting, it wouldn't matter. Growth requires discomfort, and feedback is the discomfort that points you directly to your next level. The people who grow the fastest in life aren't the ones with the most talent, they're the ones with the most humility. They're willing to hear the truth even when it hurts and then do something about it. Now, here's where accountability kicks in. If you ask for feedback, you'd better be ready to listen. Too many people say, "Tell me the truth, I want to improve," but the second they hear something they don't like, they shut down, defend themselves, or start explaining why the other person is wrong. That's not seeking feedback, that's fishing for compliments. If you want to grow, you have to treat feedback like data. You don't argue with it, you study it. You don't have to agree with every single piece of feedback, but you do have to consider it seriously, especially if multiple people are telling you the same thing. Let me tell you what ignoring feedback costs you. It costs you trust. People stop telling you the truth if you punish them for it. They just nod, smile, and say nothing, but behind your back, they don't believe in you. It costs you opportunities. Leaders don't promote people who can't handle correction. Why? Because you can't take feedback, you can't improve, and if you can't improve, you can't lead. And it costs you relationships. How many marriages, friendships, or partnerships have blown up because one person refused to listen when the other person said, "This behavior is hurting me"? The refusal to hear feedback is one of the fastest ways to lose the people you claim to care about. Now, here's the good news: feedback, as painful as it is one of the fastest tools for growth. You don't have to spend years stumbling around making the same mistakes if you'll just listen to the people pointing them out. Feedback compresses time. It shows you in one conversation what might take you years to figure out on your own. And if you respond to it with humility instead of pride, you'll improve faster than you thought possible. The bottom line is this: feedback is not your enemy. Feedback is the mirror you desperately need if you want to see yourself clearly. And you can either keep avoiding mirrors, pretending you're fine, and wondering why your life doesn't change, or you can face the mirror, own what you see, and do the work to get better. Emotional intelligence isn't just about managing your inner world, it's about having the courage to let other people tell you what you can't see. And if you want to grow, you don't avoid that mirror, you seek it out.